Direct Connect. This is the first one for 2020. Woohoo! Thank you for making it. Direct Connect is a virtual forum for youth and young adults to kind of gather and develop skill sets, connect, and share resources. Today, your lines will be muted, so feel free to post in the chat box if you have any questions or need anything. And we ask that you stay on the line at the conclusion of this presentation just to complete our course survey and let us know how we did. Today's presenters will be myself and Johanna Bergen from Youth Move National. And I'm going to go ahead and introduce myself and then pass it over to Johanna. I'm Jasmine Boatwright. I'm the Youth Programs Coordinator with Youth Move National. I work a lot with member services and also help host these Direct Connects. I have experience with being, I have experience from being, with being a local coordinator with Youth Move Detroit, as well as serving as the director of Youth Move Michigan. I was also the coordinator of a system of care group for about 14 years, which is called Youth United in Detroit, Michigan. So that's a little bit about me, and I'll let Johanna introduce herself.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jasmine. Hello, everyone. I'm Johanna Bergen, the Executive Director of Youth Move National. Like Jasmine, I come to the work through experience initially with a system of care grant in my home state of Iowa, and now several years in supporting youth-run leadership efforts through Youth Move chapters. Glad to have everyone joining us today and excited to be sharing some of the work and knowledge we have about youth engagement that you can all use in your communities. All right, a little bit about what we're doing today and the content that we plan to cover. Our learning objectives are on this slide here, but know that Jasmine and I really want to help make sure that everyone who joins us today leaves with a solid understanding about what we mean by youth engagement, and so you're able to take that definition home with you to your work. We want to spend some time covering the value of youth engagement and what we know from the world of research to help build buy-in with other key stakeholders to help support youth engagement efforts. We'll be sharing some resources and tools that are available to support your youth engagement efforts, particularly digging into the Youth Voice assessment that Youth Move National has developed in partnership with Portland State University. More on that later. And then we'll give you an idea for a structure for a planning activity if you are in the process of developing and rolling out a youth engagement strategy. And now and throughout the time, we want to remind you that we are available to support any of your additional technical assistance and training needs around youth engagement. So we'll make sure you know how to contact us and see our resources before our time is done today. Just a little bit about Youth Move National. We're a national membership organization made up of young people who have systems experience, mental health, child welfare, juvenile justice, and are using their voices of lived experience to create change and improve the systems around them. In addition to the work that we do supporting our chapter network, we are a core partner in the TA network and are available to support system of care grantees and other jurisdictions in infusing youth voice and engagement within their service and system work. And we're available, as I just said, to respond to any of your TA requests. So please feel free and comfortable to reach out to us at any time. And I'll pass over to Jasmine to get us started on content today.
All right. So we're going to talk a little bit about what is youth engagement, right? Youth engagement falls along a spectrum. And so when we're thinking about youth engagement, we're thinking about youth-guided, youth-directed, or youth-driven. And what that means is youth-guided is knowledge of services. Young people are beginning to research and ask questions and ask questions about resources. They're beginning to understand the process of systems and services. They're beginning to kind of speak their voice and learning how to self-advocate and articulate experiences that help in what harms them. When we're talking about youth-directed, young people are taking on a little more of a leadership role, continuing the youth-guided process in a safe place, taking more active decision-making role in treatment within system of care policies, and increasing the knowledge of services and resources, and just having a deeper understanding in general on how systems operate and where maybe they could have a larger voice. When things are youth-driven, youth are initiating, planning, and executing in partnership with adults at an expert level of understanding. So youth are advocating for themselves and other young people. Youth are, community partners are dedicated to authentic youth involvement. Youth fully understand their role and responsibilities on teams. And youth and all members of the team are equal partners and listen and act upon the decisions of the youth. That being said, it is important to have a full-time youth engagement specialist, especially in the youth-guided process. The youth-guided process is really where kind of youth leadership and youth voice is starting to begin and expand, and having a full-time youth engagement specialist really helps one continue to grow the youth involvement and youth voice within their organization. That youth involvement specialist is that one person that can connect with young people and kind of understand what their interests are, how to engage them within different things that are happening within your agency or organization, as well as help them be prepared and feel supported in telling their story or providing feedback in different situations. Next slide, please. So what is youth engagement? Basically, youth engagement is a strategy where youth have roles and are engaged in a meaningful way. So pretty much a strategy in which youth are giving meaningful input and have roles where they are authentically involved in working towards changing the services and systems that directly affect their lives. I don't know what's going on with me today, you guys. I'm getting a little tongue-tied. Bear with me. Okay, youth engagement. So we want to talk a little bit about building our foundation. And I know that some of you all have definitely heard the value of youth being involved before. But these are just a few reasons why, young people should be involved. One is young people being involved changes the institutional culture and practice. How many times have we had to ask a young person to help us with our phones or help us understand social media? So it definitely is great to have a young person there. They know things that I've definitely probably am a little older and didn't have to experience. Youth can help design and implement new policies and better serve youth and young adults. Youth come with their own personal experiences. They let you know what services work, what services didn't work, how that you could improve them. And I think the cool thing about young people being involved in the policy development level or service development level is that young people, they come to you with the kind of rawness and the truth. So they're telling you the complete, honest, this is what works, this is what does not work, this is how this service can help me. And I think that's super helpful for anyone to know. It builds awareness and understanding. It builds a young person's self-efficacy and their confidence, with, especially with just kind of knowing what, what they have control over, and it helps build a sense of community. Young people begin to feel more attached to the things that are happening around them and starting to learn how to get involved in some of those things. And it also improves the individual and organizational outcomes. Young people get more comfortable with advocating for themselves, other young people, which in turn helps the organization. So when we're talking about the foundation of youth development, we're really talking about the concept of moving from doing things to and for youth to doing things with youth or supporting youth to do them themselves. So the objective in all this is to promote personal growth of young people and increase organizational effectiveness. Are there any questions so far? Nope. Okay. Let me know if I'm going too fast. So this, by far, is one of my favorite tools when it comes to youth engagement and youth involvement. This is Heart Ladders of youth involvement. And I think it's a way, it's snapshots in a way, the different stages of youth involvement. And we've probably seen a little bit of all of these in the work that we've done so far. But we want to stay away from the bottom three, and we want to read this ladder from the bottom up, by the way. But you want to stay away from the bottom three, which is manipulation, decoration, and tokenism. We have seen countless times where young people are asked to participate in a meeting or attend a council meeting, but their voices are not being heard. They're kind of just used as a youth representative on a sign-in sheet, but not really, their voices are not being respected in that space. We want to make sure when we're engaging young people that we're at least starting from a point where young people are assigned and informed, and consulted and informed. And that's kind of more of the youth-guided process, where young people are not necessarily initiating different things, but they do have an understanding of what's going on, and they're able to make recommendations and considerations. And then if you want to take it a step up, youth-directed. Oh, I'm sorry, I think that's youth-directed. That's where young people are consulted and informed. Activities are designed and run by adults, but young people are consulted. Youth make recommendations and are considered by adults. So adults initiate and share decisions with young people. So, so that's kind of what that is, and that's youth-directed. And then you take it another step further, which is youth-driven, and that is where, and I think I mixed those up, you guys, but youth-directed is where a young person is designing and running, the activities and programs are designed and ran by youth and young adults. Things are initiated and decisions are made by the young people with the support of adults. And things are designed and run by young people with the decisions made by young people. I can't say that enough, you guys. Are there any questions? I know I kind of fumbled over the second half of this slide, but if you all have any questions, I'm more than happy to go back through it with you.
Jasmine, I might add a little bit about the power dynamic or the power shift that's happening as you're moving up the ladder. And so I think one of the things that we think about as we watch that adult-initiated with shared decisions with youth move to youth-initiated with the support of adults, we're really talking about a power shift from control and initiation being only with adults and moving and sharing that power with young people so that they can start something or activate something rather than living in a world where they need to wait for an adult to activate something. So just I think it's important as we talk about and use the ladder in our work that we remember that there is power sharing that is shifting as we move up the ladder.
Yes. And one of the ways that I have used this ladder in Wayne County has definitely been to kind of gauge where our different agencies are when it comes to engaging young people within their organizations. And so we actually created a survey that, based off this ladder of participation, that really asks questions around what ways are young people informed and consulted within agencies. And it asks these questions to young people. So this survey was given to 15 young people that were youth leaders within the agencies. And then it was also given to 15 young people that were just kind of receiving services at that agency, because we understood that the involvement may look different. And so we created a survey. We surveyed 30 young people from each agency. And based on Hart's ladder of participation, we figured out where the agency wanted to be on Hart's ladder of participation. So let's say they wanted all of their youth to feel consulted and informed. We looked at the results from their surveys and said, well, right now you feel more assigned and informed. These are some recommendations from our Youth Advisory Council to get you all up to consulted and informed. And this was way before we had the YVAL, which is like the greatest survey tool for young people in town. But before we had that, we definitely created a survey as a way to kind of measure how young people are engaged throughout the agency based off Hart's ladder of participation. And I know Johanna and Youth Move has also used Hart's ladder of participation in a different way.
Yeah, I find myself using this tool several different ways, right? One is as a facilitation tool. So when I'm working with a new agency that has a goal of increasing youth engagement, just going through a discussion activity, asking everyone in the room to look at the ladder and share where they most commonly find themselves working in partnership with young people. Sometimes surprises come out in that discussion, like as Jasmine found in Detroit, young people say that they really feel like they're informed, and the adult partners around them really want them to feel like they're in a consulting role. So we can identify that as a group and then think about those strategies in which we can implement to shift that role. We also use Hart's ladder in the chapter application process at Youth Move. So when a youth group is interested in joining our network, we ask them a couple of questions around the ladder. One is asking them where their youth group, so as a group of young people, when they're designing their own work, where are they on the ladder? And then we ask them to reflect on their community around them, their support community. Where does their community engage them on the ladder? And it's not uncommon for us to find that those self-reports include that youth rate themselves higher on the ladder in their own space when they're making their own decisions and initiating their work than where they feel like their community is. And for us, it's a good data point as we begin to meet and engage with a new group, and it's a place for us to work strategically to grow from, right? And I think it can be really exciting for youth leaders to realize that their community has opportunities to deepen their relationship with youth partners. So we try to accent and highlight that as an opportunity for future work. Jasmine, I'm not sure if you said it earlier, but I think it's always important to say a couple of times when we talk about the ladder, the narrative or the story of the ladder, I think, challenges us all to move up it, right? Like when I see a ladder, I want to climb it. I want to get to the top. But a Hart's ladder is really about helping you identify which step you are on it isn't necessary, and in all of your areas of work, you are not always going to be shooting for the top of the ladder. And in fact, in most projects that we have in partnership with young people, at different stages and phases, we're going to find ourselves at different parts of the ladder. And we may move up and down the ladder in one specific initiative. And that's actually good, right? I think a lot about this in system of care communities, particularly when we have governance councils that young people sit at. There is a lot of space in the work that we do where youth and adults need to make decisions together. And we might find ourselves in some of those more formalized circles and councils being at that youth and adult initiated and directed rung. And that might be the ideal place for that council to be at. At the same time, your system of care might be investing in a youth council or a youth group in your community, and that youth group may well be operating at the highest rung of youth initiated and directed. And those entities in those spaces are going to accomplish different things in partnership with young people. So I just want everyone to feel really okay with the fact that throughout your work, you're going to find yourselves moving up and down the ladder.
Thanks for mentioning that, Johanna.
Yeah, for sure. Anything else about the ladder before we move on, Jasmine?
Nope, I think that was it.
Okay, cool. So this next slide is another image that we really like to use, and this is a way to think about the fact that there are so many ways for young people to be involved. Like, the number of roles that youth can play are really countless. We've tried to document just a few options for you on this slide. So this is an adaptation from some research and work that's been done around patient engagement, particularly in health spaces. And we've made some adaptations to really think about youth engagement and youth voices, particularly within the mental health system. So you want to read this from left to right, and if you look at the orange-brown words at the top, we're talking about the different types of roles in which young people can be engaged. So on the left-hand side, young people can be informed, right? We can inform young people of the services and the supports and the options. And then below the word inform are some of the ways that young people might engage with us in that category of engagement. As we move further right, the role or the intensity the young people are playing deepens. So moving on to a consultation role. We saw this word on Heart's Ladder, right? We're providing information to young people and asking them to respond and share and give us information back. We probably all do this, sometimes really intentionally and sometimes almost by accident, right? Any type of your evaluation or quality improvement methods, if you send out surveys, if you have a suggestion box in your office, those are places and ways that young people can consult. You might also have more formalized roles for young people to serve as advisors or consultants to some of your groups. You might invite them to engage in interviews where they can more candidly give some of their raw feedback and reality that Jasmine spoke about earlier. As we move further right, the roles continue to deepen. Jasmine, did you want to add something in there?
Well, yeah, I was just thinking, I think one of the best ways to engage young people as consultants, sorry about my dog, are definitely to include young people in interviews. I mean, young people ask some of the best questions, especially in my community. We definitely wanted to make sure we were including young people in system of care specific interviews, because we knew that those who were being hired in for the system of care roles will probably touch all of the systems. And so we wanted young people to really be in the room to say, hey, do you guys think this person, what's your history of working with young people or engaging young people in the past? Our young people have asked a ton of great questions in interviews. So I just wanted to throw that out there, that is the perfect way to engage young people.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Jasmine. And I think you're exactly modeling sort of the opportunity to move from a consultation role to an involvement role really easily, right, by following the insights and the skills of youth that you're working with. So as we continue to the right, we move on to involvement, then collaboration, and then empowerment. And many of you may be working in communities where roles are filled by young people across the spectrum, right? When some of us who work as youth peers or youth coordinators find ourselves really in that far right empowerment role. An activity I like to do with groups is to throw this up on a big sticky piece of paper and have everybody use sticky dots to identify where young people currently serve in these roles. So where do you already have young people in roles, adding more boxes underneath for you to share the particular roles that you have in your community. And then to pause, to take a look at that, and then with another color dot, go ahead and put stickers on all of the boxes where we would like to bring young people into roles in the future. It can be a really quick activity to go, oh, you know what? We have had young people co-train, co-lead our workshop trainings. We haven't had them on the stage at our conferences. That's a goal for us in the next year. And so I love that as like a very simple mapping activity. And then I would be remiss in adding across the bottom of this in the brown arrow, these are all of our trauma-informed care practices. And it's really important to note that no matter how you're engaging young people in your work, these are the values and principles that we need to bring into the relationship and into the work that we have with young people. And they need to exist across all of the roles and opportunities that we offer to youth. All right. In the world of introducing you to new concepts and strategies, we wanted to talk a little bit about the youth-driven organizational purpose areas. I want to talk a little bit about why these exist and how they were created, and then we'll dig into a couple of them to share examples for you. Tammy, I'm seeing your question in the chat box. We can talk about it more later, but I think we might touch on a couple of recommendations as we talk about these purpose areas for you today too. So at Youth Move, we do a lot of capacity building as youth groups get started in their early days, and we oftentimes field questions from agencies and from community leaders that say, what does a Youth Move chapter look like? What does a youth-run program look like? And then they say, how do I make it happen in my community? Essentially asking for the 10 puzzle pieces that if they put together in the perfect way, ta-da, there will be a strong youth-led, youth-run program in their community. And what we say when people ask us these questions is, we don't know the answers for your community. What we need to do is convene young people from your community and ask them what they need and what they want to see in their community. And we understand that that's a frustrating response. And so we spent a lot of time with these questions. We ended up switching the questions, the sort of the how and the what questions, instead to a why question. And so the question that we asked the field is, why do youth-driven programs and organizations exist? For what purpose are they trying to fill in our communities? And we asked one of our local Youth Move chapter leaders to conduct a series of interviews with other Youth Move chapters, asking them this why and these purpose questions. All of the responses were pulled back together and organized, and after we did the organization process, we realized that they all fell into themes or buckets. And in the end, we ended up with these 6 themes around why youth-driven spaces exist. Now that these have been defined, when youth groups start to convene and organize and plan their activities, we use these purpose areas to help them figure out what their primary and secondary purposes are, and can be very connected to the development of logic models and implementation plans for what youth engagement is going to look like in their community. I love the purpose areas because they give us a little bit of structure and direction. They help us know and understand that we're going in the right direction, but they don't prescribe to any specific community what they have to do. So they give a lot of bandwidth to young people to define their community's needs and then define their own strategies to fill them. I might start talking about one of my favorite purpose areas, and then Jasmine, can I pass over to you to talk about one as well?
Well, yeah, and one of the things that I wanted to point out is that we do have a document on our website that kind of lists out the different chapter purpose areas. And I found this document when I was a youth coordinator to be one of the most helpful things because I found myself coordinating a group, well, several different groups, and each different group had a different purpose area, it felt like. And I think the great thing about this, the actual document, is that it does help you think about what are some of the potential outcomes as well as some example activities, which was super helpful for me as a coordinator trying to figure out the actual functioning and purpose of each group.
Yeah, totally. Jasmine, thanks for sharing that because I think that's what we're finding in communities across the country. So one of the things that I wanted to highlight was a couple of different activities that youth-run programs might find themselves developing and offering in their community. So one is personal development and empowerment. Within this purpose area, we're really talking about capacity building, skill building skills for young people. So this is going to be really concrete things like mentorship experiences, mentoring programs, how to write a resume, how to figure out what education pathway you might want to take, how to do a job interview, but also a lot of social skills, developing an ability to practice being successful in your life, right? And we find a lot of youth-run organizations will spend quite a bit of time developing young people's capacity in this way. At the same time, we'll see other youth-run programs and other organizations focusing quite a bit on the youth voice development and leadership training. Programs that these groups might offer could include leadership training, advocacy training, really still about skill building and capacity building for young people, but focused on building their skills to be active in the systems change work. And then we'll find youth programs that are offering a variety of programming that cover both of these bubbles. They've found a couple of purpose areas that they really want to fill. So not every young youth program will offer all of these things, but we'll usually pick a couple of the areas to focus in. And the focus areas are chosen, again, because young people have identified that those are the places or the things that they need in their community. Jasmine, are there any others you would highlight?
My favorite is definitely the recreation and peer networking. And the reason that this is one of my favorite is because when you bring young people together and they're able to collaborate with other groups, plan things, whether it's youth groups or other recreational events or activities, what begins to happen is they start to come together and figure out what other things they have in common and what other things they have in common that they're interested in. And so with the right questions, you may have a group that will start developing things that they're interested in and things that they would like to see change within their community and different things that they would like to see change within their organization, just by creating that safe space for young people to kind of sit and network with each other and develop some informal peer support. And from that, you get to grow, through into more of a community involvement or advocacy group. Then young people kind of, from what I've seen, groups begin to flourish from just starting with the recreational and networking opportunities for young people.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing, Jasmine. So as we mentioned earlier, there's a longer document that provides examples of each of these purpose areas that we would encourage you to take a look at. either to find sort of your peer group in your focus area or to identify all of the ways you could take your work in the future as you're planning.
And I'll drop that document in the chat box for those who want to take a peek at it.
Awesome, thank you. So we conduct a lot of focus groups and engagement opportunities with young people across the country. And at one point, we were collecting input from young people about youth-adult partnerships specifically, working to identify multiple things that youth define and want out of partnership opportunities with adults. And so just a quick summary of some of the things that we hear most frequently on this slide. Young people are really hungry to have options and choices in how we ask them to participate in our work. So if we think back to that chart of all of the youth roles that are available, young people really want to be able to see that menu and to identify for themselves what the best fit is. So I think sometimes we get started, we get excited, and we might ask a young person to join us on a panel presenting to a training or a workshop audience. Well, if the young person really isn't that interested in sharing their story behind a microphone, they might say no and step away from the opportunity. But if we were able to offer a menu of options of would you like to be involved, as Jasmine mentioned earlier, in our interview process with other young people, they might get very excited about that option instead. And so choice is really important when we're asking young people to join us in work. Youth always also want to have those options so they can build on their own skills and their own interests. And again, I think sometimes we lock ourselves into an invitation that has a yes or no answer. And I love to create invitations that have a yes or answer. So give another option as you're going. When we invite young people into our space, I know for my sake, I'm always really excited. And I have my own vision and dream and expectation of how amazing our work is going to be because of our youth partners. But if I fail to set up those expectations and that ideal vision with our youth partners, we can end up really frustrated with each other and not meeting each other's expectations. And so being really clear about the roles and responsibilities of the youth engagement options from the beginning is important. Youth continually ask to work in the supportive environment, to have access to coaching and mentoring relationships so they can continue to grow and excel in their roles. The word meaningful comes up all the time in our work. Jasmine started with it in our definition of youth engagement at the top of the hour. And for me, this is really like young people know when we're faking it, right? Like we gotta be real and authentic. And so oftentimes those desires are summarized in this meaningful word. We wanna be there for work that matters, that makes a difference. Opportunity to grow and change. Maybe I joined an initiative and I was a part of an interview team, but I'm ready for something new. I want there to be an opportunity to grow into a new role. So creating that pathway for youth engagement growth from the beginning is really great to think about. And then we didn't say it as much in the chapter purpose areas, so I want to say it here. Connection to others is so important. I always say that pizza does not equal youth engagement, but youth engagement usually has pizza. And it's a corny way of reminding us all that we want to have fun and build relationships and connections with our peers in the work. And that is an added benefit of being a part of youth-led change, but it's also a benefit that we need to plan for, both in time and resource. So just a few things that we hear from young people in terms of what they want when they walk into partnerships with us. We also couldn't resist asking young people when we work with them of what do you need from adults, right? Like how can a partner come and be an ally to your youth leadership work? And many rich responses to this question whenever we facilitate it. Again, summarizing a few findings today. Come and be open-minded and flexible. Don't assume you know what we want or what we need. Be ready to change and flex around young people's needs and desires. Be respectful of the readiness of young people. We really hear this as young people say that they might feel overprotected or almost smothered in the work, and they really want to be respected and seen as a partner that's ready to be active about change. So respect that young people do show up at the table with their own readiness level. Create a respectful and nurturing. Oh, yeah, go ahead, Jasmine.
For that one, I definitely just wanted to make the point of how many times have we heard, have we asked for young people to be engaged or involved or, hey, maybe this young person may want to come to this committee meeting, and we've heard, oh, we don't have young people that's ready yet, right? And that's without asking any young people if they're interested, without seeing what additional supports they would need. And I think that's something that's commonly said. And so I just wanted to throw that out there while you were at that bullet of like when we're talking about respecting the readiness of young people, we won't know how ready they are or how ready they would like to be if we don't ask.
That is so true. That is so true. As we ask young people into our work, it's important, and they tell us frequently, to not overpromise and underdeliver. I'm always learning in this environment. An example that I always share around this is that I am ready for new ideas at all the time, but I do have an inability to be a responsive text message sender like after 10 p.m. I'm just going to be slow to respond. So I will love to hear your idea, but I might need to talk about it tomorrow. And just setting up the expectation of our relationship as we enter into it. And then continue to offer and expect that the levels of support that we offer to each other in the relationship will change and grow throughout time. So again, being open to being flexible and revisiting what is needed in the work. I'm going to shift us to a next piece of our time together and introduce one of those tools that we were talking about at the top of the webinar and focus a little bit on assessments. And then we're going to talk about a couple of ways to use assessments in your work. So I'm going to toggle back and forth between a couple of slides here. But the Youth Move, as I mentioned, in partnership with Portland State University, has spent the last couple of years developing two assessment tools. One is called the Y-Val and one is called the Y-Voc. And these are assessment tools that we developed to help agencies and collaborations understand how well developed their youth engagement practices are, and to help them identify and understand what practices or implementation strategies they would like to invest in to improve, improve their youth engagement strategies. So I'm going to first introduce to you the tools, and then we'll talk about how to use them. So the goal of the assessments is to provide a framework of key indicators. And again, these indicators are things that you can measure and see, like, are we implementing them? Do we have this practice? Is this something we haven't developed yet? The choice of an assessment allows for a couple of things to happen. One, it allows for any agency or collaboration to invite all of its young people and all of its adult partners to reflect in a 360 assessment. And then the data that comes back from these assessments creates an opportunity for collective reflection. And we see that reflection time as being very important to move youth engagement strategies forward, and we appreciate that the assessment is a model that allows for that to happen. Our goal in creating these assessments is to raise awareness amongst those embarking on youth engagement efforts on where they are and where their growth opportunities are, and to help young people understand and grab hold of certain things that they want to advocate to change within the youth engagement practices in order for youth engagement and youth voices to become more meaningfully incorporated into the work. So there are 2 tools, as I mentioned. So first we created the YVAL, and the YVAL was created. It's been validated as a tool and is available for use in the field right now. The YVOC has been created and it is in a validation study right now. So it is available for councils or committees who are interested in participating in the validation study, which is really cool because you can take the assessment and you get a report back created by us as a thanks for participating in the study. So you get more than just your raw data, you get a report, which is great. And then when that validation study is complete, it will also be available in the field for y'all to use as well. Okay, so what are in these assessments? So this slide right here covers the YVAL themes. So the YVAL is youth voice at the agency level. So it's looking at youth engagement in decision-making within a specific organization, so a closed organization. There might be a board of directors, there might be administrative leadership staff, maybe it's a provider agency, so we have clinicians and practitioners, and then we have youth advisors in an advisory council, maybe youth representation on the board, youth in a quality improvement team, etc. All of those individuals within that closed organization would be invited to take the youth voice at the agency level assessment. When they take the assessment, they're going to be ranking how fully developed the practices are in these 8 themes. So starting with looking at the organization's overall vision and commitment to youth engagement, through workforce development, are young people with lived experience a part of hiring on staff, all the way to youth-led initiatives and projects. Each theme has a bunch of different components that you would all rank yourselves on. And then the assessment, again, is 360, so all those young people and adult partners' voices are heard and then looked at totality in the data. The YVOC, on the other hand, is youth voice on councils and committees. These are places where multiple organizations may come together around a specific table, and they are engaging young people in their decision-making at that council or committee. This is definitely designed to fit system of care governance structures, also advisory sort of nature if you have sort of a cross-system youth collaboration in your community where service providers from juvenile justice and child welfare and education and mental health come together to triage. If there are young people at that table, that will be a great table to use the YVOC assessment, again, to deepen your youth engagement practices. The YVOC is a little bit shorter. It has the same as the first 4 themes of the YVAL, with some components that have been changed, again, to meet that collaboration structure. The other themes are not assessed in the YVOC as they apply to organizational policy that usually does not exist in these collaboration spaces. There's a ton more information about these assessments on the Youth Move website. We're happy to help you access them and understand them. I'll let you know that they are available, so you can request a paper copy of the assessment from our website. Definitely take that to your organization's evaluation or quality team. You can implement it and use it in your community with no charge. That assessment's available to you. If you don't have a data collection process, you're welcome to reach out to us and we can talk you through some options about how you can conduct an assessment. But what Jasmine and I really want to talk about with you today is that these assessments can be valuable in different ways. They are assessments, but let's look at them in a different way. Let's look at them as facilitation tools or strategic planning tools, and they can be really beneficial in your work without ever collecting any data. Or maybe you want to use them in a different way before you do data collection. So that's what we're going to talk about for the next few minutes of our time together. if you take it as an assessment, that's the Likert scale that you'd be ranking each of the components on for fun to see that. Okay, so how do these assessments get made? I think it's important to know the story a little bit. Youth Move National convenes our Youth Best Practice Committee, which is made up of youth and young adults who advise our product creation at Youth Move. They helped, a subcommittee of that council helped develop a very long list of all the ways that an agency could engage young people and describe to us how that an agency could do that in the best way possible, essentially writing out that gold standard of youth engagement. We needed to do this process because in order to create the assessment, we really had to first define our understanding of youth engagement best practice that we could measure against. And it's because that list had to be created before the assessment that I think we're really finding all of these exciting ways to use the tool. So after that very long list was created, and let me tell you, it was very long, it was themed. Those themes eventually turned into the 8 themes that are in the assessment. And we worked with our awesome research advisors at Portland State to turn those themes into these components that were measurable, and several iterations were created before we got to this final product. What you see on the slide right now is an example of some of the components that are in Theme 1. So again, Theme 1 is looking at an agency's overall vision and commitment to youth engagement, specifically in advising and decision making. In Theme 1, one of the components that's measured is formal policy. And to us, formal policy means that the agency has in writing descriptions of why and how it engages young people in advising and decision making. For example, an agency might have 2 seats on its board of directors reserved to be filled by young people who have previously received services from them. That would be an example of a formalization of a policy to ensure that youth voice was always heard at their board leadership level. Many other ways.
Another
do this. Oh yeah, Jasmine, go ahead.
Yeah, another example is definitely having a policy that defines the role of young people in the advisory capacity. And then you mentioned having 2 seats on an advisory council or board for young people. And I think that's so important because young people, we just need to make sure that we're having more than one young person represented at the table. I mean, let's be honest, it's kind of intimidating to be a young person in the room with full of professionals or adults, as well as young people kind of build a peer support around each other and support each other with advocating or speaking up within the group, as well as even down to, you know, what you may wear to the meeting. So it's really important to have more than one young person present as well.
Yeah, definitely. Another component that's measured in Theme 1 is, does your agency have a written statement about youth engagement, like a vision of youth engagement? We see organizations that create this purpose statement for youth engagement, printing that on agendas, particularly when they bring outside stakeholders into work, so they understand the expectation is set throughout the agency that young people's voices are valued and will be heard in the meeting space, setting the expectation for everyone they engage with. So this is an example, right, of one thing that's in one of the themes. So if you're interested in seeing the specific components in all of them, we'll get you the link to request the YVAL in just a minute. We wanted to give you a taste of this so you understood what the YVAL looks like. We also want to spend the rest of our time with you today talking about how else to use the YVAL assessment. So one way we can do that is thinking about how we can look at the components and the questions in the assessment to build our capacity to engage young people. Okay, so let's see if I This is correct. Yes. Okay. So here is an example, and we have a couple of examples that we'll go through like this, where Jasmine and I took the components that are in the YVAL and changed them into question form, so we could use them as facilitation with an agency that is working to create its youth engagement plan. There are more than 4 questions in theme 1, but we picked these 4 as examples. And so the way you could use the assessment in this way is to convene your youth engagement planning group, or the stakeholders that need to have buy-in and voice in developing your youth engagement strategy, and to ask each other these questions and to document your answers, and then using your answers to develop and prioritize your action steps for the future. So we talked over this first question just a bit ago, like, is there a shared written vision for youth engagement in your agency and collaboration? If you ask Jasmine and Johanna, what is the vision for youth engagement at Youth Move National, would we give you the same answer? If the answer is no, then we might want to put on our to-do list doing some work around writing a vision statement for youth engagement. Does that make sense? Sorry, I love these questions. I got a little lost in this. Okay, so
holding express gratitude, respect, and welcome to you. Like that one could be, is as simple as thinking about how are we telling young people that we are taking their feedback and their input and implementing and making decisions based on what they're saying. How do we get that information back to them? So something as simple as a feedback loop and expressing gratitude. Are there stipends? Are there ways for young people to be compensated for their time? Are there, is there minimum, support with transportation or, gift cards or whatever, but how are you expressing gratitude, respect, and welcome to you? Also, are there activities that young people have planned that's important to them that are being able to be implemented? Sorry, Johanna.
Perfect. Yeah, I think the gratitude piece is really big for me as well, and we hear from young people frequently. And oftentimes I think we observe a practice where we are grateful and communicate with a specific young person, thanking them for being in the work. I think it is a good practice to extend that into public spaces. So how do we thank our youth advocates within our larger agency meetings for the work and to identify publicly the way that their input and their voices have shaped or changed the way we do business, and that acknowledgement with our larger partners can be really valuable to keeping young people engaged and incentivized in continuing to share their wisdom with us. So I'm hoping you can see, like, as you read these questions and are thinking to yourself, do we have roles for youth that are clearly defined? If we don't, what might that look like? Who would need to be involved in defining those roles? Where would they be written into our process? Who would need to have an understanding of those? So when Jasmine and I are in person in a room with you, documenting these answers to the questions, we're very quickly populating that list of potential work to do in the future. And then you can use, multiple sort of prioritization, facilitation mechanisms to figure out your action plan or what to do next to deepen your overall vision and commitment for youth engagement within your organization. The second theme of the YVAL is about collaborative approach. And again, same thing here. We took some of the components within the assessment, flipped them into facilitation questions to give you another opportunity to see how this tool might help facilitate your youth engagement planning in your community. So starting off here, how are youth engaged in planning stages of efforts in your agency or collaborative? This is a really big thing. So best practice in youth engagement is that if you're planning to do new work in your community that is going to affect young people, as you're planning and visioning for that work, oftentimes you might be writing a grant application to fund future work. We should be engaging young people in the planning stage. We find all too often that really great plans are developed by really well-meaning partners who are not young people, who develop a plan, maybe even identify and secure the funding and start the work, and then 6 to 12 months into the project say, now we're ready to invite young people to the table. What we find when this happens is there's a significant amount of time, right, where young people have to be caught up to speed to understand the scope of the project. Oftentimes we've made enough initial decisions that new ideas can be hard to incorporate. And this can be a really frustrating, even tokenistic experience for young people. So the assessment definitely challenges you to think about how can we be how can we be better practiced in engaging young people earlier in our idea phase, our planning, our brainstorming phases, so their voices can infuse the plans of the work that we're doing rather than inviting them in as consultants or advisors to a project that they haven't been able to affect the structure of. Are there other things in the collaborative approach that you'd like to highlight, Jasmine?
Well, meeting and communicating with youth in a way that works for them. I think I've learned quite a few lessons around that myself. I mean, think about it. Like if we have meetings scheduled at 10 o'clock on a school day, are we really making this something ready and available for youth to be able to attend? Are we sending emails when youth maybe prefer text message? So just, being mindful and maybe working. I mean, the best way to kind of solve this problem, in my experience, has definitely been asking young people their preferred way of communication, what meeting times and days work for them, and then scheduling our events and meetings around that, opposed to sending something that may not work for them. And we have to keep in mind that young people are in college, young people have jobs, young people have a ton of things going on, and we want to be respectful of that.
Definitely. All right, I'm watching the time a little bit, so I think I'm going to keep pushing us through the YVAL theme so you can see how this can continue to work. The third theme is young people as empowered representatives. There's so much important things looked at in this theme. Again, we just pulled out a couple of them for you today. So when we invite young people into our agency or collective's work, what does training and orientation and onboarding to the role look like? How do young people learn what their role and their responsibilities are and what supports are offered to them? We're getting a lot better at some things. I remember when I initially was invited into a system of care effort as a youth advisor, the first few meetings were full of system jargon and acronyms. And that can be really challenging to feel that you can fully engage if you're trying to decipher the world's 1.5 million acronyms. So we see really strong practices of organizations providing onboarding binders, acronym lists, developing meeting practices where you might ask everyone in the room to not use acronyms. So what does that welcome and orientation process look like? And if your organization doesn't have an orientation process, what would we like it to look like? Could we ask some young people what would have been most beneficial as we invited them into a youth advisory council role, for example? I think debriefing is really important too. I always recommend that when we invite youth into meetings, as Jasmine already said, never just one young person. We always want to invite multiple youth into our work and not provide an expectation that a youth needs to speak on behalf of the entire young adult population. So more youth voices is better. But I think debriefing sort of two things. One is like, who's the person you can pass a Post-it note into the meeting to ask any question in the moment, or to text under the table like what is going on? And then who do young people talk about after meetings or after trainings or after conference opportunities to talk about what went well? Were there things that you wanted to say but weren't confident in the space? Let's talk about ways for you to circle back and get your input heard at another point in time. That debrief and connection point can often be held by a youth coordinator or a youth engagement specialist. If your agency doesn't have a youth coordinator role, thinking really critically about who that primary point of contact and relationship can be developed for the youth that you're engaging.
And the preparation piece, me as a local coordinator, that was one of the things that I really tried to make sure that we were intentional about, because we didn't want our young people to go anywhere blind. That's not a good feeling for even us as adults. And so what we would do, if they were requested to participate on a new committee or a new council or attend a meeting that was already existing, we would ask for like previous notes. We would work with the young people to kind of check in with them, see if they had any questions, figure out what things stuck out to them that has already happened. We would also ask for the agenda leading up to that meeting so that young people had the ability to kind of look over, especially if their name was on the agenda. We wanted to make sure that they knew what they were walking into before they got there. And I think that's super important, especially for young people like me who have anxiety, knowing what to, what to expect before you get there could be, the difference between a young person saying nothing in the meeting and a young person being very active and participatory throughout the meeting.
All incredibly important points, Jasmine. I love that you're reminding me about how many real-life lessons learned were infused in the creation of the best practices that exist behind this assessment. Exactly the examples we're sharing with y'all today are the things that young people were sharing with us that we tried to effectively turn into these components that you could measure in an assessment. So an activity that stretched our brain but ended up leaving a really great product for us all to be using. The next assessment theme is commitment to facilitation and support of youth participation. So this section is really talking about barriers that can prevent young people from fully engaging with us, and incentives that we can put into place. So we've touched on the sort of values that need to operate underneath this in particularly the first theme, the vision and commitment to youth engagement, and then this theme gets pretty concrete, right? So what is your organization's policy on compensating young people for their time? When we convene stakeholders from our community, most professionals are coming to the space and to the work on behalf of their job, where they're receiving a paycheck and an expectation that they participate. How do we show that we value their expertise at the same level that we value the expertise that comes from lived experience and system navigation of the young people that we're inviting to the table? This is an incredibly important thing for us to think about because it affects our allocation of resources and it affects the way that we choose to operate to put our values into operation. A lot of times we'll work with organizations that feel like they have minimal resources, particularly dollars, to put towards youth engagement. And the recommendation really is to start with something, right? To start with an honorarium or stipend policy that honors and respects young people's wisdom that they're sharing with us. And then we recommend that young people be asked to engage in developing that compensation policy. So really bringing young people together and being very transparent. This is the budget that we have available. This is why. This is our budget amount. What do you think would be the fairest and most equitable way to create a policy to honor the time of yourself and your peers? And we've seen some pretty innovative compensation policies put together by young people. And I think the part that works the best is that by giving young people ownership in that policy, it seems to be more effective in its use, and we've really brought youth into our planning and operation process in a way that helps us practice our youth engagement values. Jasmine, you've mentioned a couple of other barriers like transportation. Do we help young people get to the events that we're inviting them to? Lots of young parents, myself included, needed to access childcare in order to participate in some of these activities. Are we thinking about these barriers proactively and helping get them out of the way so youth can fully participate? Are there other examples that you want to make sure we add to the thought process, Jasmine?
Well, the last thing, which is the last bullet, do agency collaborative staff have dedicated time to invest in youth engagement efforts? And I find that one to be, like, this one is glaring out at me because so many times we see that the adult support connected to the youth involvement group or the youth council have maybe caseloads or other things going on within their own role, which kind of puts youth involvement on the back burner. So I just think it's important to point out that if you are, if your intention is to have adult support that will be able to have time to invest in youth engagement efforts, definitely either make sure you carve out enough hours for them to meet with young people. And I mean, we've seen roles where, adult support roles where they've had 10 hours carved out for youth engagement efforts. And I mean, that's not enough for young people who, I mean, we just talked about different opportunities and training and coaching young people and supporting young people. In 10 hours within a month is not necessarily enough time for young people. So you want to think about like one-on-one coaching. You want to think about supporting them to be prepared to go to different meetings and events, and really being honest as agency leadership on how much time needs to be dedicated to support the young person.
Yeah, that's awesome, Jasmine. I always think when we're making the recommendation about that dedicated staff time that we all have been in the place where we have our full job description and then the last bullet is other duties as assigned. And when youth engagement and youth relationships gets put under that bullet, we know that we're going to be challenged, that the resource of time is not going to be big enough. And so thank you for continuing to call that to light, Jasmine. So for today's webinar, Jasmine and I pulled out these questions for the first 4 themes, partly because there were the themes that allowed us to say some of the things we feel like are most important to be said, and because those 4 themes are covered in both the YVAL and the YVOC assessment. So no matter how you're sitting or where your youth engagement efforts are, if it's within an agency or within a collaborative change effort, these themes would all apply to you. But in work that we've done providing technical assistance and training to organizations and councils, we have pulled out questions from all of the themes. We really do believe that just starting with the act of requesting a copy of the assessment and reading it and bringing it to your team's attention can start really impactful shifts in how you engage young people. So hopefully these examples are helping you think about how an assessment can be about data collection, and I'm happy to be geeky with you about that. And an assessment can also be this framework for facilitation of planning for your youth engagement plan. And we're really excited as we watch folks all over take the YVAL and the YVOC and use them in very innovative ways. So we hope that you take a look at them and are inspired to use them in an entirely new way, and then we can learn from you. But these slides, as we said at the top, are available for you in the download pod. Take these questions and use them. I think we've seen a couple of things. Jasmine and I have been most often using these in sort of longer planning sessions where we're asking multiple questions at a time. But we also see the potential, if you have a regular staff or team meeting, that you take a couple of questions at a time to challenge yourself to think about and work through the questions and the prioritization of what comes out of your discussion over a period of many weeks as you move through all of the domains. Maybe one more note about these assessments. The other thing that we can think about is the value of assessment. The first time that we use an assessment, it will definitely give us data that we can think about how to use, right? We're also, the first time we take an assessment, establishing a baseline. And I love the concept of establishing a baseline because then if we come back and take the assessment again in 6 months or 12 months, we're able then to see and monitor our impact and our growth in youth engagement. But if we never start asking where we are today, then we're not going to be able to document that growth. And so we are encouraging particularly agencies who start and want to take the full 360 assessment to consider making that a part of their annual practice to return back to. All right. Let's pause. A reminder that we'd be happy to take your questions. If you want to throw any questions that you have for Jasmine and I in the chat box, we would love to hear them. And then, Jasmine, do you want to start talking us through some of the resources that we want to leave them with?
Well, we definitely shared the chapter purpose areas in the chat box, so definitely download those if you haven't already. But some of the other resources that you all may want to check out is definitely our Things to Consider, which is also listed on our website under resources. And this is the things to consider on creating youth advisory boards, stipending youth and young adults, measuring success, our youth engagement guide. That one is super helpful because it also makes you think about recruitment, outreach, a ton of things. So definitely check those out. The majority of these are listed on our website. And we could also get you a copy of them if you need us to. Just reach out to us.
All right.
Yes,
so
I can.
Oh, you got it. Thanks, Jasmine. So all of those resources are available to you. We encourage you to check them out. And then if you have questions about use or looking for other resources, we will make sure that you get our contact information before you're done. You're welcome to provide or send questions directly to us. The other resource that we really want to make sure that you all are aware of is the Youth Leadership Learning Community. So as a part of our role in the TA network, we host a learning community at Ideas at the Institute. This is a free online learning community that you are welcome to join. One of the activities of the learning community is offering webinars like the one you're on today. So the recording and the resources for this webinar will find its final home in that learning community, so you can check it out, share it with your peers who might need to hear this content later. But the learning community also includes links to resources, archives of other webinars, access to some office hours and direct time on the phone with Jasmine and our other colleagues at Youth Move National, as well as a common discussion place where you can ask questions of your peers. The learning community is designed specifically for those that are working as youth advisors or youth leaders in creating mental health systems change. and those that are working in staff roles supporting youth-run programming or organizations like youth peer providers and youth coordinators, etc. So it's a pretty welcoming group, and we're designing resources directly for you, so we'd love to see you there. Again, registration's free for that, and it's an easy place to access sort of all of the archived webinars that we have offered. One more resource that we want to make sure that we share with you is that we host bi-monthly youth engagement office hours. I'm laughing that I'm talking about this, Jasmine, because you're actually the host of these.
Yes, I was going to jump in. So our youth engagement office hours are bi-monthly, and it's pretty much a way for us as leaders in the youth workforce to kind of come together and have dialogue. If you all have any questions that you need answered and want to just jump on there opposed to filling out a formal TA request, you can definitely do that. If you need resources, that is a perfect place for you to kind of jump on and say, hey, do you all have resources around starting a youth group? And myself and Madeline Zielinski will be able to get you those resources right away. The cool thing about the youth coordinator's office hours is that there is like this peer-to-peer learning that happens where something that you may be struggling with or a barrier that you may have, other coordinators also have the ability to kind of give pointers on what they've done and ways they have have addressed those barriers. And we send whatever question, if you join the youth coordinator's office hours, there are tons of different coordinators on that ask tons of questions and request different resources. And we send a follow-up email with all of those resources. So even if someone else on the call suggested something that you were like, hey, that may work for my group as well, you'll also receive that resource. The next office hours is March 18th from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern Time. We just had one, January 15th. And feel free to, check us out. We're always sharing the office hours information on Facebook, or let us know if you would like that information and we'll get it out to you. It's also sent out in the TA Telegram.
Awesome. So a final opportunity to ask any questions if you have them. I'm going to circle back to a question we had a little bit earlier in the webinar and address it more directly about recommendations for promoting alternative activities to, as prevention and early recovery for young people in your community. So many things that can happen. One thing that I have observed has found a lot of success is to conduct a community mapping project with young people. And this can look a lot of different ways, but community mapping or resource mapping, if you do a quick Google search, has a lot of, there's a lot of frameworks and examples that you can use in your community, but essentially sitting down and asking young people, what are the resources, where are the positive, fun places that you can go to spend time, to engage with peers that are safe, etc., and helping them develop and identify that map in the community. And then there's a variety of ways to disseminate that information. We've seen communities make apps or Google Maps that are interactive to say, here, your peers have identified these places that you might want to check out. The other thing that can happen in a community mapping project like that is we can identify the holes. So maybe there are times in your community or days of the week or neighborhoods in your community that have very limited options for sort of positive, safe space for young people to be hanging out, and that can help you identify what new partners or what more new resources you might be looking for to build in some of those opportunities. It's a great youth engagement strategy, actually just an early project to do when you're engaging young people in general, but also a project that really ends up with you having a very rich data set, all from the perspectives of young people. All right. I think Yes, right. And the last slide are our email addresses. Please feel free, as Jasmine said, you can submit a more formal TA request to us. You can also just hit us up via email or our website. We would love to be in contact with you and continue to support you in your youth engagement efforts.
It looks like we have Tammy chatting, writing in the chat box, so I wanted to give her a second.
All right, yeah, we can give everybody a minute more to ask, to ask any questions that they might have. Again, if you want to download the slides from the webinar, you can do that. Click in the Files pod. For everyone who registered for the website or for the webinar today, you'll get a link to the recording as well to share with your peers. When we complete our webinar